What's going on, everybody? Hope everyone's doing well. In today's video, we're going to continue on with this tutorial series. And what we're going to do in part 2 is do a full underwriting for subject to. So I've got a property that I've already pulled up through the MLS, and we're going to go from start to finish on the underwriting for subject to properties. So let's get started. I'm going to drag this window on over. This is the property that we are going to underwrite for subject to. Now, a quick glance at it. We can take a quick look at the property photos, should you choose. Normally when we're doing any type of underwriting, repairs is not something we underwrite up front. It's to be expected. There will always be miscellaneous repairs, whether it's cosmetic or structural. But we can see here that this property is in decent condition. And the reason why this is going to be a subject to property is based off of what the value is saying from PropStream. So we're going to take the property address here. If you do not have access to PropStream, highly advisable that you get PropStream. I think it runs about $100 a month. I believe I actually have a link in my former videos there on YouTube where you can get about 50% off on PropStream through a partnership with them. So you would actually be around $50 a month. Highly advisable that you get yourself PropStream. Now, the property address is here, and what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick look at the mortgage balance. We see here that we see an estimated loan balance of $368,904. I see here that it's an FHA loan, interest rate of 5.25. The reason why this is subject to is because it has very little equity. So we go over to MLS details. We can see here that the current list price is $400,000 according to PropStream. We'll head on over here to Zillow. We can see that it is indeed listed at the $400,000 mark. So some quick math. If you take 10% of the current purchase price, that would be $40,000, and there's an estimated loan balance of $368,000. So if we round that up to $370,000, because when we are constructing loan payoffs, usually a loan payoff would be the existing loan principal plus the estimated payment, the P&I. So if you want to get an estimate on what the loan payoff will be for the seller at the time of closing, you can take the estimated loan balance plus 2081.72, which is the estimated loan payment, and this is how much it's expected to close on that loan. There will always be miscellaneous fees with closing out the loan early. So they're all in at about $370 at closing. Might actually end up a little bit more, but we're going to take the $370 number. So let's go to our calculator here. The first thing that we can fill out is the $370, which is going to be the encumbrance. We're going to go back to PropStream. I do not see any type of liens associated with the property. Normally they would be here on the left-hand side. If there is a lien on the property, such as an HOA lien or a tax lien, be sure to add that to the total remaining loan balance. That will give you the total encumbrance. I see here that this property is owner-occupied. They've had a length of ownership of less than 2 years. And that would explain why they have very little equity to begin with. Something to note with PropStream is here that it is reporting negative $46,000 and that it's upside down on equity, but this is incorrect, as this number here is based off of the estimated value and the loan balance. So that is how they are getting negative $46,000 in equity. But we can clearly see that it was listed at $400,000. And so they do not have negative equity, but they have low equity. So the next thing to do is to take a quick look at the rent. I want to know how much rental value this will go for. on a subject to transaction. It's important that we know this up front because the only play here for subject to transactions is cash flow. There is no equity being acquired from the property. There's very little skin on that bone, very little meat on that bone is probably a better phrase. And with very little meat on the bone, the only option you have is to increase that cash flow every single month or wait until the property appreciates to the point where you can actually sell it. So on this screen here, on this page from Zillow, I do not see an estimated market value. Oh, here it is. We're seeing at about $2,700 a month on rent. That seemed a little high. I'm going to take a look at the square footage here. 1,800 square feet. I think this is Atlanta, so it's quite possible. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to put this over on the Price My Rental and double check that because that seems a little high. All right. If you want to learn how to comp, it's super easy for rental comps. Click on single family houses, since we're looking at single family. For the distance, let's try and stay within the 1 mile range. Circumference of the property, if we can't find any comparables within 1 mile, then we'll push it out to 2. It's a 4-bed. I think I'm going to start at 3 and then work its way up to 4. And let's look at the last 30 days for rental comps. All right, we're sitting at 1,800 square feet, and I'm seeing 3 properties that are less than a mile away, and they're actually quite high in rental value. So this could indeed be a $2,800 a month rental income. Let's go with that for the time being. When we are doing a final underwriting on the property, meaning you have a yes from the seller moving forward and they have accepted your offer, during your due diligence period is when you will underwrite these numbers again and make sure that the rental comps are as accurate as you thought they were when you were doing a pre-underwriting. So we don't want to spend too much time on pre-underwriting because that would defeat the purpose of making an offer on the property as quickly as possible. But because the rental estimate here, according to Zillow, was quite higher than I had anticipated, I wanted to just double check. And it seems like this seems to be comparable. So we're going to put this at $2,800 a month on rent. So we'll come over here, change this to $2,800. And what we want to do now is take a look at the market value of the property. Now that was not visible here. We can see that it's missing. So what we'll do is we'll take the property address. We'll move this over into Redfin. Redfin should get us an estimate of what the current market value is of the property. So let's start a new search. And we're going to paste it as soon as the internet loads. Okay, it's running a little slow today. So we're looking at a property estimate of about 336. Interest rates are quite high, and we're still kind of in a declining market here. I'm going to be a little pessimistic and say that the market value is at 330. It may actually be less than that. It might be closer to 325, but let's take 330 for the time being. So we're going to put that in current market value of 330. Now, recall that the listing is being sold on the MLS for $400,000. So that's almost $60,000 over market value. So that seems a little egregious. However, the reason why it's being sold for such high is because of the underlying encumbrance. They can't go below 370, otherwise the property would be considered a short sale. And so they have no choice. And so this would be inaccurate assessment here actually by PropStream. I was not expecting them to get this accuracy. Normally they are incorrect when it comes to this, but this is actually fairly accurate. We're sitting at around 330 on market value. So this property is completely upside down on the equity. So the only option that we have here on property such as this is the cash flow. Now the P&I is $2,000. So with taxes and insurance, that is going to go up to, let's say, maybe $2,600 all in. And we've got a rental projection of about $2,800 a month. So now we're looking at a cash flow of $200. But those $200 is gross. That does not include property management. That does not include repair reserves. So are we going to be able to cash flow on this property? It's possible. We're going to underwrite it anyways and see if we can actually make it work. So being that the property is listed at 330, what I might want to do is incentivize them with a cash offer first. Now I can't insult the seller or the agent in this case. I need to be reasonable with my cash offer. But there's no way that I could be reasonable with my cash offer knowing that the encumbrance is 370. So in this case, a cash offer of 100%, even though that seems out of this world, giving that type of cash offer when the current market value is 330, what we're going to do is we're going to illustrate a comparison for both the seller and the agent. We want them to consider creative. We want them to steer away from cash and conventional, and we want them to consider creative. So we know that the current market value is at 330. I'm going to bump this cash offer up to, let's say, 120%. Okay, that's way too much. What I want to do here with my cash offer is force the seller to reconsider how much money they are going to receive at closing with a cash offer. So what we also need to add is the agent commission. We're going to presume that it's going to be around 3%. And there's going to be a best case scenario of all the closing costs, about 1%. So 3% towards the agent, 1% towards closing costs. This is best case scenario. So at a $396,000 cash offer to the seller will walk away at closing with roughly 10 grand. I'd like to bring this down to maybe about negative 15,000. So let's adjust the cash offer to maybe about 110. Okay, we're getting close. Let's go to 112. There we are. Now there will be no taxes on there because they have to come to closing with $15,000. That is why it's highlighted in red. And so what we're going to do is we're going to compare and contrast and provide a visual representation for the seller and the agent. Now you might be asking, well, David, what if they are willing to come to closing with $15,000 just to get the property out of their hands? Well, until something is in writing, you, the buyer, the investor, can go back to the seller, rework your numbers, and you can come up with some kind of verbiage saying, you know what, 369 is a little too high for me. I'm probably going to be closer to 363. And now the seller has to reconsider. Do I want to come to closing with $21,000? So it's never a done deal until it's signed on paper. And the point of doing this again is to incentivize the seller and the agent to consider creative, especially with interest rates at 8% and a property such as this at very low equity. So what we are going to do is, knowing that the seller is currently $70,000 over market value, we're going to place that in here. They are currently listed at $400,000. We're going to plug in $70,000. This is their current list price. Let's see what happens if we give them 10% of the $40,000. And we need to also include the sales fee. So it'll be about 3.7. Now you might be asking, why is the sales fee 3.7 and not 4%? Well, typically with a creative solution, closing costs tend to be cheaper. And one of the reasons why it's cheaper is because the seller is not paying the miscellaneous fees that go towards closing the loan off early. And so that helps dramatically. That's one reason. And there are a few others. And so we can see in this example that the agent will actually make $1,000 more just by currently having it listed the way it is. So by presenting a creative offer to their client, they will walk away with $12,000 as opposed to the seller having to come to closing with negative $15,000 and the agent walking away with $11,000. So there's an incentive for both parties. Now, $25,000 at closing seems like a lot of money the seller is going to be receiving, especially on a property that has an extremely low level of equity. We know that the encumbrance is $370,000. So really their gross equity is zero, but they're currently listed at $400,000. So let's bring down that down payment to $30,000, as that is going to be the spread between these two numbers here. And now we've got a 9% down payment to the seller, and now they're really walking away with $15,000 as opposed to coming to closing with negative $15,000. In fact, we could actually probably just change this to 1111, just so we're not looking at two variables that both happen to be the 15 mark. So negative $18,000 versus $15,000 at closing. Which one do you think the seller is going to choose? Well, what they choose is going to be depending on how well are you able to communicate and convey your message to the seller and agent. Communication is very important in this line of business. So, seller gets to walk away with $15,000. The agent is going to get paid $12,000. So in a sub-2 deal such as this could be a win-win. Now, if we come over here to the estimated deal projections, we've already plugged in the $2,800 for the long-term rental. We've got an entry cash projection of about $36,000. Our entry fee is below 10%, which is great, especially if you are deciding to assign the deal. If you are choosing to assign this deal, let's say you're asking for a $10,000 assignment, as long as this total entry fee is below 12%, you can assign your deal. Anything over 12% is going to be a case-by-case scenario. So if you really wanted to sell this property on an assignment, I would bring this down even further to have a 10 right in front of your entry percentage. So this would be a $7,000 assignment minimum and up to a $10,000 maximum, maybe a little bit more, maybe a tad more. You could probably get $11,000 max on an assignment. And now if we take a look here, we can see our estimated cash on cash percentage is going to be around 11.69%. And we'll have a cash flow. This is a stress test, and we're stressing to see how well we're going to be able to cash flow. Now, according to the stress test, we're going to be cash flowing about $460 a month. Anything over $200 on a stress test is worth my time to consider a full underwriting. And the reason being is we're being pessimistic with that rent. According to Zillow, we might actually be able to get $3,000 a month in rent. And if we go over to our price rental, like we did before, we can see that we've got 3 great comps over here. Let's head on over to the left-hand side. Yeah, I would say just by taking a quick look, without doing any other type of research, I would say these are great comparables. So we might actually be able to push this to $3,000 a month. Now, this is pretty much it for subject 2. Seller finance, hybrid, both of these calculators, they're not needed. Why are they not needed? Because the seller carryback is 0. The seller is receiving a payment up front. That payment could be gross equity. That payment could be net equity. And they are not receiving anything on the back end. So the top portion here is going to be your best friend for underwriting subject to offers as well as pre-underwriting. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the master tab and we're going to pretend that we're going to send out an LOI. So let's incorporate that now. So let's go back to the listing. Let's go over here, and let's see if we can pull the agent's name. We can. Her name happens to be Martha, so we'll just copy and paste Martha's name. We'll head on over to the master tab. We will update the input here. We are working on a seller finance, a subject to deal type. I did not see a agent's email above. I see a phone number here. That's useful. So let's plug that into the master input tab. And in terms of the agent seller's name, for their email address, if you're trying to find the email address for the agent or the seller, you could shoot them a text. You can contact a brokerage. You can try doing a quick Google search. There are many methods to pull the email address for an agent or seller. In this case, let's put in Martha123@gmail.com. We're going to pull the property address one more time. It's 530 Elmwood Road. Copy. Go over to our input tab, and we're going to copy and paste that into our property address. Now, you can see that everything was updated down below, so it'll get auto-saved as we're moving along. What I'd like to do is go back to PropStream real quick and take a quick look at the loan origination. That will be the property details. Scroll all the way down. And we can see here that it had a loan origination of May 1st. It's an FHA loan. Looks like the amount was for about $376. And so they really do not have any equity on this property, unfortunately. Beautiful property. Nothing wrong with the property. It just happens to be that the market's not doing well. So it's not the seller's fault. So what we're going to do is, now that we have the rental value, we have the market value, we've plugged in all of our inputs here. Now we can actually send out our LOI. Before sending out our LOI, double check that everything here is according to your standards. And we'll head on over to the Sub 2 tab below. You will have the flexibility to edit this however you like, but the standard inputs are ready to go. So we've got a cash offer at $366. We have a creative offer at their current list price of $400,000. Seller can receive $15,000 at closing, or the seller can come to closing with $18,000 at closing. Let's take a quick look at the last sold price, as we do need to take a look at the tax percentage for creative here. That was something that was left out. Let's take a quick look at the last sold price here. Looks like it was last sold for $390. And we are going to minimize this. We're going to plug in $390 on our last sold price down below. And we're going to have a tax gain of about $10,000. So they are going to have to pay taxes on this. So that'll bring their net profit down ever so slightly. However, there might be ways for you to get around that, depending on who you're working with, title company or attorney. In most cases, they'd be willing to drop the sales price to $390 on paper at closing, just so that the seller doesn't have to pay about $3,000 in taxes. In most cases, they're willing to do that, and it would actually be a miscellaneous fee on the HUD for the seller. So for the time being, let's just keep this at 0%. They do technically have to pay taxes, but we might be able to adjust this for the seller's sake at the time of closing. The agent commission would still be coming off of $400,000. So let's go back over to the sub 2 tab. We can see here the option breakdown for cash. We see a non-refundable down payment to them for $30,000, which is being pulled from that cell over there. And we've got an explanation of how subject to transaction works, advantages to the seller, closing attorney information, whoever it is that you decide to go with. If you want to drop a link for your credibility as a buyer, this might be a good place to include your credibility in any recently closed HUDs or any HUDs at all, for that matter. And when you're ready, when this is all filled out and to your liking and style, simply come on over here to column J, row 2, and we're going to designate the end row. So when we are creating a PDF, we want to tell Excel, when do you want me to stop making the PDF? Because if we don't tell it when to stop, it'll continue and continue and continue creating pages upon pages unless you tell it where to stop. And so I think for the sake of the example, we're going to tell Excel to stop at row 128. So when we open this up later, we will see the buyer HUDs closed, and this will be the last page. So row 128 will be our last row that will be included, and it just so happens to be included here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to convert the text to PDF. You can see how that's just auto-populated. I am going to bring over the creative LOIs that are generated, and we can see it here. 530 Elmwood Road letter of intent. If we open this up, bring this over to the next window, and we scroll on down, everything was saved accordingly, and we did tell Excel to stop at this last page. There are no pages beyond this one, and so it did what it was supposed to do. And now it's time to send the email. So we'll click on send email, and we can see here that we've got the agent's name, property address, CC, BCC. We've got our shared input variables of $2,000, 5 days for the DD period, excluding Sundays, which you can see here, 30 days to close, class of escrow, 16 days. There's an embedded picture here that you can also change at any point in time. This just happens to be part of the template. And so now we are ready to send out the email. If you want to change the body paragraph for any reason, you absolutely can. We can exit this one out, and you can select a different type of body paragraph, whatever it is that you decide to incorporate. Let's say you had something else in mind. Come on over to the body input, go back to your sub 2 tab, click send email, and whatever body paragraph that you designate will be included. And so now we've created the PDFs with the mathematics involved. The agent's information is ready to go, and all we have to do now is just click send. And that concludes part 2. Part 2 was pretty much going to be covering the sub 2 portion of underwriting. There's not going to be too much involved with this type of underwriting, as normally we're not dealing with any seller carryback, and so the mathematics involved is going to be quite simple. So stay tuned for part 3.